Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about the 5 considerations that you should look at if you're trying to make a decision whether to finish the basement in your custom home. All right, everybody, like I said, today we're going to talk about a topic that a lot of our clients ask us about. And so we're going to give you the 5 things to consider to help you make the decision whether you should finish the basement in your new custom home. So before we get into that, let me just take a real quick minute to remind everybody, our channel is all about everything building a custom home. So from the very beginning, finance, planning, design, architecture, building, moving in, whatever it is, anything about custom home building, that's what our channel is all about. So if that's an adventure you're thinking about going down the road of, definitely take the time, subscribe to our channel, hit the little bell down below so you get all the notifications. We're posting new content for you every single week. And we are a custom home builder here in the state of Colorado. So if you're in the Colorado area or maybe thinking about a move here and considering a build, we'd love the opportunity to sit down and chat with you and see if we might be a good fit to work with you. All right, so let's get into it. So 5 things to consider when you're trying to make that decision. Man, should I finish the basement in my custom home right now? Should I wait to do it later? Or do I really even need a finished basement? So let's talk first things first. The big thing that I like to look at is, what are you gonna do with the space? Do you just kind of want a couple extra bedrooms, or is it a specific situation where you've designed the home and without finishing that basement, it's going to be super, super tight? Maybe you're going to have kids doubled up in a bedroom that you didn't really think that was going to be the case. Or maybe you're not going to have a guest room, but you know you've got folks coming over for the holidays as soon as your house gets done. A lot of it really kind of comes down to, what are you going to do with the space? What do you want the space for? If you just want a big extra rec room for the heck of it, I don't know, maybe that makes the decision a little bit different. So number one, I would say, just think through what you want the space for. What was it that you planned to do with that basement whenever you finished it? Because you may be able to save some money if you think about what you do whenever you finish it. So definitely think about what you planned on doing with that space when you kind of had this plan in your head of what your custom home was going to look like and how you picture yourself living there. So number one, what do you want the space for? Number two, kind of along the same lines, is, do you need this space? So like I mentioned, maybe you said, hey, we need to have at least 4 bedrooms in our new house because we've got, it's husband and wife, you've got 3 kids, and you promised the kids everybody could have a new separate bedroom if they decided to, hey, it's okay if we change school districts and we got to make new friends. That was a sacrifice they were willing to make. But now you don't want to go back to the kiddos and have to say, sorry guys, gals, we're only going to have enough bedrooms for everybody to double up in a bedroom. So just think about what you need the space for. If you really do need that space for family members to have a bedroom, whatever the case might be, maybe you work from home. A lot of people say, I need another office space down in the basement, away from the hustle and bustle of the daily life. If you really truly need that space, really think through that and don't sacrifice a need just because some of the other things that we're going to talk about. So number one is definitely, what did you plan on doing with the space? Why do you want it? And then there's number 2 one, I would say definitely consider, do you need the space? And sometimes the answer to that is yes. Because like I said, maybe you've designed the rest of the house where without that basement, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense for you. But when you finish that basement, it's the perfect house and everything about it's great and wonderful. All right, so next one, let's talk about budget. So does it fit into the budget? This is probably the number 1 factor, as you can imagine, as to why people decide to finish the basement or to not finish the basement when they're going through their initial build. It's all about the budget, the dollars. So, really, I like to look at it and say, man, what's the cost benefit that it's getting me? Is it one of those things? Let's use rough numbers. And I think this is pretty accurate for a lot of houses. You could say, I'm going to put this house on an unfinished basement for an extra $100,000. So instead of just having a main level or just above grade, we're going to do it with a basement. Cost me an extra $100,000. But if it's on a ranch home, you almost doubled your space. But now let's talk about the finishing cost. A lot of that depends on how you decide to finish it. What type of finishes do you want? Are you okay with those secondary bathrooms maybe not having quite as nice a cabinetry or tile? Do you need a wet bar downstairs? And if so, are you okay with those cabinets and that countertop not being quite as nice as what it is up in the kitchen? You can definitely save some money, but it depends on a lot of factors on the size of the house and everything else. But $50,000 to $100,000 to finish out the basement is probably very reasonable for most custom homes. So let's say it's $75,000. That $75,000 is going to get you, again, if it's a ranch plan, almost double the finished square footage. Is that worth it compared to the total budget of the house? I think a lot of times that answer is yes, but then we've got to take a look at the budget and say, okay, man, that's going to put us $25,000 over our max budget that we were comfortable with. So now we've got a delta of $25,000, and we've just got to kind of think through it and say, is there something else or maybe a handful of different line items that we might be willing to sacrifice right now so that we can get that finished basement and still stay within our budget? So really, like I said, one of the main factors that always comes up is, does it fit within your budget? And that's just something that every individual has to look at. But I always recommend to folks that if it doesn't fit in your budget, don't go over the max budget you're comfortable with, but take a look and see how much it's going to put you over, and see if there's maybe some other things on the house that maybe you could sacrifice or do later that would be a lot easier to do later versus a basement finish. So why do you want the space? Do you need the space? And does it fit into your budget? Number 4, cost now versus later. As you can imagine, typically the cost to finish a basement, if you're going to hire a contractor to do it anyway, it's going to be much less if you do it while the home is under construction. It's a lot easier to get material down there. The trades are already on site, so the framers can frame the basement while they're doing the rest of the house. All the rough mechanicals and electrical can get 100% done. All the plumbing, drywallers can get in there while they're doing the rest of the house. So they're already there. So it's a lot less expensive to have it done while the house is being built versus you've got your brand new house all finished. Maybe it's not a walkout, so now you've got guys taking lumber through window wells, maybe traipsing up and down your brand new carpeted steps in and out of the house to try to get that work done in the basement. It's more difficult for them. It's going to be a lot more headache for you for sure, and that cost is going to be higher doing it after the fact. Now again, we got to go back to number 3 and look at the budget. Does it fit into the budget? And if not, maybe we have to do it later, but just know going into it that if you do it later versus right now during the initial build, your overall cost is going to be higher. Again, maybe that's the best thing, but just definitely take that in consideration that the cost now versus later is certainly going to be different. All right, and then the last thing that we get a lot of questions on is, does it really matter? Like, am I going to get my money back whenever I sell the house? You know, a lot of folks, they go into the project, they build a custom home, they think they're going to be there forever. You know, it's their true dream home. And for a lot of folks, that's the case, and that's great. But for a lot of people, they end up selling that home in the future at maybe a predetermined period of time or maybe just an unknown period of time, but they do end up selling the house in the future. So they always want to know, okay, worst case scenario, if I have to sell this house in the future, am I going to make my money back on that basement finish? Or would I have been just as good just to leave it unfinished and I would have recouped all my money anyway? So on the resale side of it, man, I definitely say, at least here in Colorado where most houses have a basement, definitely, you're going to get your money back on the basement. Like I said, if it's a ranch plan, you're almost probably doubling your square footage. Depending on how the 2-story is laid out, if it's a 2-story home, you're probably adding almost a third of the square footage back to the house to get that basement in there for probably less than $200,000. And if we're talking about a home that's $1.5 million, that amount of extra square footage, price per square foot, it's a screaming deal. And on the resale side, you see that as well. There are certainly homes that, you know, people just don't want a basement on the resale side, and they say, I don't want any steps, I don't want to deal with the basement, whatever the case may be. But remember, it's not just about the finished space down there. It could be just, even if a person wants to buy a home resale, they might like the extra storage space. So even if it's finished, they can still use it as storage space if they want to. All the mechanicals can be down there in unfinished space, a little section of it, so that's not kind of intruding on the main level of the house. So from a resale side, man, I definitely say, I'll say 99.9% of the time, you're going to get your money back on that basement finish, and you're going to get your money back on just having a basement overall, 100% here in Colorado. Now, I know that varies a lot throughout different parts of the country where basements aren't quite as popular. If you're in, you know, South Texas, it's probably a little bit different conversation, right? But at least for here in Colorado, and I really think a lot of different regions of the country, on the resale side, a basement's a huge plus if folks are looking at your house maybe versus another one without a basement. So definitely, from the resale side, do a basement, finish the basement if it's in your budget. All right, so let's recap those 5 things right now to take a, like I said, these are really just things to consider as you're trying to kind of work through this decision. Should I finish my basement in my new custom home? Number 1, why did you need the space? Or rather, why did you want the space? What was the vision that you had for it? And if that's important enough, then man, definitely figure out a way to make it happen. Do you need this space? If that was part of the overall design, whenever you sat down with the architect and designer and figured out exactly what you wanted your house to look like and how you wanted the spaces to flow and how you saw yourself living in the house, if the basement was a piece of that, definitely don't sacrifice it. Figure out a way to make that finished basement happen versus moving into a brand new custom home that you're just really not happy with, or you know that just 6 or 12 months down the road, you're going to be finishing the basement anyway. Number 3, probably the most important, probably should have made this number 1, is does it fit within your budget? So as I mentioned, finishing basement $50,000 to $100,000, real rough numbers could vary from that, of course, depending on the house. But figure out how much, if it's not within the budget, figure out how much it's going to put you over your max comfortable budget, and then really kind of work through those different line items of the house with your builder and see, man, are there some things that we could take off right now that'll be a lot easier to finish later compared to finishing a basement after the fact? And maybe you pare those items down, get that basement finished, and then after you move in the next year or two, maybe you can do some outside, some extra landscaping, maybe some different finishes on the outside of the house that you wanted but you might sacrifice now. So just really take a hard look at, does it fit in the budget? And if it doesn't, if number one and number two still make enough sense as a reason to get it done, then try to figure out a way to maybe clean out some other line items or minimize those so you can find that within your budget to do the basement finish. Number four, cost now versus later. Sad fact is, like I said, 99.999% of the time, that basement finish is going to cost you more after the fact. If you're trying to do it a year down the road after the main house is all done, it's going to be a lot better financially, or at least from a cost standpoint, to have it done while all the trades are in there working on the rest of the house anyway. And just the convenience of having it done versus having them going in and out of your brand new custom home while they're trying to finish out the basement. And then the last one, the last one, resale. I definitely say it's worth it from the resale side. That's been my experience. And I do run a real estate sales team as well. So definitely our experience is that it is worth it on the resale side for sure. Sometimes it could depend on how long you're going to be in the home, but that's really just kind of resale in general. If you're going to sell a year later, you may not recoup all of your money back for a lot of your different things. But if you're going to be in the home for a couple years, there's definitely going to be a market, especially in our region, of people that expect to have a basement. A finished basement is a big bonus for sure. And that $50,000 to $100,000 cost, whatever the total bill is, you're certainly going to recoup that with the additional finished square footage that you provide for that new buyer that's taking a look at your house. So hey, those are the 5 things I would consider if I was trying to make that decision about, do I finish my basement or not? There's certainly a lot more other things to consider out there. If you have any questions at all, please definitely don't hesitate. Call, text, email, hit us up in the comments, reach out anytime. Just want to make sure you have all the information to make the best decisions you can as you're going down the path of potentially building a custom home.